Why do you think that Truman has never come close to discovering the true nature of his world until now?
There is no prison more effective than one invisible to our eyes, but Truman is starting to notice the cell bars.
We accept the reality of the world with which we're presented. It's as simple as that.
Truman arrives at a newsstand, one of the most important sources of news, entertainment, and communication in Truman's special society. Like every other aspect in Sea Haven, the magazines and newspapers are made to serve a specific purpose: controlling Truman.
Get me a paper there, will you, Errol? Oh, and one of these. The wife loves her fashion mags.
That'd be all for you, Truman?
That's the whole kit and caboodle.
Take a closer look at the books on the shelves. These magazines describe actions Truman is expected to perform in his daily routine, commonplace things, yet simple and positive. And oddly, there is a notable absence of world news or magazines presenting diverse points of view. Every book on the shelf is meticulously crafted to mold Truman's mind. There are magazines titled Cook's Garden and Home. What is unsettling is that Truman does not even need to purchase these magazines. Merely seeing their titles is enough to manipulate him, planting ideas in his mind of things he ought to do. These are in fact the themes that dominate Truman's daily routine. On the upper shelves, we spot a magazine titled Modern Dad, and on the lower shelves, some books say Child, Dog, and House. The arrangement of the magazines is no coincidence. Christoph, the director of this production known as Truman's Life, wants Truman to have a child with his wife to boost the show's ratings. This means that even when Truman is out to purchase a magazine, newspaper, or book, all those items serve to manipulate him and keep him on the path the show wants him to follow. The next stage of the program is turning Truman into a dad, hence the constant subliminal messaging we will see throughout the rest of the film. The beginning of the story clearly shows how Truman's society maintains control over his life, and how everything he sees is controlled by the Sea Haven system to steer him toward the path Christoph has envisioned for him. Now, also on the shelf, we spot a magazine featuring a dog that bears a striking resemblance to Truman's neighbor's dog, with the title, Dog Fancy, Choose the Right Doghouse. Once again, every single aspect of Truman's life is influenced by everything, including these magazines.
The wife loves her fashion mags.
That'd be all for you, Truman?
That's the whole kit and caboodle.
Catch you later.
Besides books used to manipulate Truman, his society has actual product placements that are used in the outside world, such as there are extras assigned to maneuver Truman into proximity to these products. One such product is Kaiser Chicken. In this scene, two brothers bump Truman towards a poster for Kaiser's free-range chicken. Indeed, these sudden and not-so-subtle accidents happen quite frequently to poor Truman. The people in Truman's world are constantly promoting or marketing consumer goods, and these strange events lead Truman to question such peculiar behavior, such as the brothers Ron and Don's oddly comedic behavior. After bidding the brothers farewell, Truman continues on his way to his place of employment as an insurance salesman. Truman sits in his cubicle and begins behaving strangely as he looks at the magazine he bought. The cubicle is a box, or display case, and Truman is the main display piece. The office where Truman works resembles more an exhibition space or habitat. The concept of an ordinary man trapped in a cubicle is a common motif in other films such as The Matrix and series like Severance. There is a certain affinity between office work and a false fabricated reality. On Truman's desk, there is a picture of his wife, and we also spot a vision board featuring his goals, along with many pictures of global destinations that he dreams of visiting someday. The first thing Truman does after arriving at his box is make a phone call to seek information about the distant island of Fiji. However, he is interrupted by a co-worker who draws his attention to the day's newspaper. The newspaper is titled The Island Times, a clear allusion to the New York Times. The paper's headline reads, "The Best Place on Earth. Sea Haven voted planet's top town." Alongside coverage of the results from a local gardening competition, it's obvious that this newspaper is designed to convince Truman that he is quite literally living in paradise, the finest place on Earth, and there is no place better or worth visiting. The town's main newspaper's assertion that Sea Haven is the best place in the world is intended to keep Truman complacent. Yet despite supposedly residing in a paradise on Earth, Truman feels like he is trapped in a prison. He yearns to leave for Fiji. This is why his co-worker is serving as a persuader to keep him anchored in Sea Haven. After Truman initially brushes him off, the co-worker ultimately prevents Truman from making arrangements to visit Fiji. The magazine that Truman purchased is brought back into focus, and the book's cover story focuses on a woman's life after childbirth. Once again, all the subliminal messaging surrounding Truman is conveying specific messages to him. One book said that Truman is already living in the best place in the world, and now a second book is talking about having kids.
Okay, do you have a Sylvia garland? S for Sylvia.
At this point in the story, Truman is actively searching for a woman who is in some way connected to Fiji. Details on that will be revealed later. Now Truman's boss arrives to hand him a work assignment, one designed to steer him even further away from the idea of Fiji. Just as Truman is searching for information about another country, his job steps in to satisfy his need for adventure by sending him on a trip by a mode of transportation he fears the most, a boat trip. Truman initially refuses to go, claiming that he has a dentist appointment. However, his co-worker insists that he must go to the island to meet a quota. Reluctantly, Truman arrives at the harbor. He approaches the ticket booth and asks for a ticket for the ferry.
One way or return?
Return.
The ticket agent asks Truman if this is a one-way trip. Truman shifts his expression and replies that he will be returning. Although Truman may feel like an outsider, Sea Haven is still his home. The camera moves through the ticket booth window, and we see Truman debating whether or not to board the boat. He slowly walks toward the ferry, and once again we see two white columns, symbols often associated with rites of passage, as Truman attempts to cross the threshold onto the boat, but then he stops. He grasps the columns and turns back around. A man asks if he needs help. Truman replies that he will be fine and leaves the pier. Even though Truman longs to travel the world, he is terrified of even taking the ferry to a neighboring island. His fear renders him into a somewhat tragic figure, leaving him trapped between his dream to see the world beyond Sea Haven and his fear of actually leaving. However, as we shall see later, Truman's fears have been deliberately instilled in him by the very system he is trapped in. Finally, Truman's wife Meryl enters the scene, a blonde-haired woman with a fake smile that no matter how hard she tries, deceives absolutely no one.
It's a chef's pal. It's a dicer, grater, peeler all in one. Never needs sharpening, dishwasher safe.
Meryl's demeanor is hardly that of a sincere person. She is merely playing the role of a wife, selling a product on the behest of the higher powers controlling her life. In this case, a chef pal knife. Much like the Kaiser's free-range chicken ad, this is another product placement, a calculated attempt to influence viewers to buy the knife, and it's one of the reasons why Truman resents her odd demeanor. But simply put it, Truman senses that the woman he married is not real, yet he dares not speak that suspicion aloud.
Wow. That's amazing.
After Truman finishes mowing his lawn, he heads out to meet his old friend for a chat. Marlon is drinking a Penn Pavel's beer. The beer company happens to be one of the biggest sponsors of The Truman Show, which is why its products appear everywhere throughout the film.
That is a beer.
Yet it is not exclusive to this one movie. The beer and its manufacturer are fictional. However, the products have appeared in other films and shows, such as The Walking Dead. Marlon says, "That's a beer." That's the beer's catchy slogan. That isn't something a normal person would say, but for Truman, it is perfectly normal. He's used to it. In fact, everything Truman sees and consumes are products marketed by him and everyone else around him. It's now nighttime, with a full moon hanging in the sky, and Truman is playing a round of golf with Marlon. Truman tells him that he is tired of his job, and his friend suggests a career change.
Here you go. You should try stocking vending machines for a living.
No thanks.
Now there's excitement.
Don't you ever get antsy? Itchy feet?
Truman still longs to travel the world, prompting Marlon to ask when he plans to do so, but Truman doesn't have an answer. We then see Truman arrive at the seashore, where the origin of his trauma is revealed. His phobia of the open sea comes from a tragedy he endured when he was a boy. When Truman was a child, he was sailing the waters with his father. A storm came, and his father fell into the water and drowned. This is why Truman fears the sea. However, as you should already know by now, nothing in Truman's life was real. not even the tragic death of his supposed father. As Truman reflects on his life, it starts to rain. He stands up abruptly and runs back and forth, and what we see is a column of rain following Truman around. And taken aback, Truman moves away from it. Truman cannot fathom how this is possible. Rain is falling nowhere else but above him, like a showerhead. He steps away, and then, what likely happened here is that the director thought Truman would just stand under the rain and cry. They were not expecting Truman to stand up and move around fast. The reaction caught the crew off guard, resulting in a blooper or glitch on the set, again exposing Truman to the fact that his world was not real. Glitches in reality, déjà vu, and the Mandela effect are events describing inconsistencies in reality. In the film The Matrix, one example of such glitch occurs when the main character experiences what he thinks is déjà vu. In The Truman Show, the moments when reality reveals its artificiality begins through the actions of Truman's social circle and eventually through the environment itself, like the unnatural rainfall. In olden times, rain was regarded as a symbol or gift from the gods. Our ancestors would perform rain dances in the hope that the divine would send them rain. Yet over time, science provided the explanation behind the phenomenon known as rainfall. It's not an act of the gods, but rather a natural hydrological cycle. In The Truman Show, however, the force behind the rain is not a natural cycle, but a guy flipping a switch. Not a god, but someone who believes himself to be one. Truman yearns to escape, yet everything, the print media, the radio, his job, his closest friends and family, and even nature itself, conspires against him. Worst of all, Truman remains under the illusion that he is in control of his life, a cruel game designed by a man who observes every single thing in Truman's life. I'm a Gloomy Geek, and don't forget to like and subscribe.